And welcome to NewsNight. I'm Ladi Akeredoluale. Thanks for being with us. Security and the tackling of security challenges is once again our focus today. How can the role of the Nigerian police be better defined and executed? What about the issue of funding the battle against insecurity? My guest believes that Nigeria must prioritize the issue of funding of security agencies and identify what it is prepared to give up in order to accomplish stated objectives. My guest also says the issue of who is to collect value-added tax should ultimately be resolved politically. NewsNight talks to the former managing director of the Lagos State Security Trust Fund, Mr. Fola Arthur-Worrey. Mr. Arthur-Worrey, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Pleasure. Always an honor to come to channels.
Our major problem in the country today is security. But I want to take you up on an aspect of it that many people rarely talk about. Yeah. But before we get into it, I want to ask what your general impression is about the situation. I remember the last time I spoke to you, we talked about security.
We did indeed.
But since then, of course, there have been some alterations. What do you make of the situation now?
It's complicated. I would say that it's become so widespread, particularly violent crime. So widespread. I mean, how many years ago we were looking at the Northeast?
Correct.
And hoping that eventually, that would be dealt with. But the spread of what people refer to as banditry is worrying. So we've got a multiple of pressures on the existing security institutions. You've got the Northeast is still a problem. I think there's just a report about an attack on Sokoto. Sokoto. Zamfara is offline. They've cut the communications, which is rather extreme, but they must have a plan. Although they say the people are using the networks of the Niger.
Of the Niger, that's it.
You've got Southern Kaduna, which is a constant. I mean, I don't think we've had the experience of so many reported deaths constantly. Then the kidnapping. Bethel kidnappers have just released another 10. So you ask the question, have the police given up on any rescue mission or whatever? You've got the Southeast and supposedly IPOB or ESN or unknown gunmen. You've got kidnapping as a general, thing.
Yeah.
So clearly, I mean, there's been a growth in the insecurity, and the question is whether there's really a plan, right? A plan. I mean, I would not have expected 15 years ago that Air Force jets would be bombing within the country. I mean, when you procure Air Force jets, it's generally for defense of territorial integrity. But I think, one, we were rather taken by surprise. Two, we were a bit slow in response. And three, we've not reformed the police to the extent that people have been talking about over the years so that they would be first responders and deal. So there's this almost over-reliance on the military, both for internal, robbery and almost warlike situations in some of the other states. But I think there might be a shift because remember when these events started, the army that Nigeria had was a traditional army, trained as an army in a symmetric war where you're facing another army, right? Defending the borders, etc. So I think we have to understand that it's taken them some time to begin to shift to special forces sort of things. And even the minister said it the other day that they used to be very defensive, but now they are going on the offensive. So there might be some relieving of pressure there. But the way it has spread, and Nigeria is a very large and complex place, terrain and everything, is going to be a real challenge. I also worry about the cost of the war vis-a-vis other parts of the economy. How long can a country like Nigeria, which is not a rich country, despite oil and, wealth is a much bigger expanse. If your revenues are oil, and we're moving into the electric vehicle age, and right. Therefore, you have to look long term. Can we afford this battle, or what do we give up? We're going to have to make sacrifices, and I suggest that the citizenry be brought in more in terms of contributions. And no country fights a war just from treasury. They sell bonds, they sell military bonds, they raise money from. I think we've been a bit passive as citizens in terms of the support for that extended military operations that are likely to go on for at least another 5 years. So then, apart from the insurgency and all of that, there is the urban safety,
what you might call the regular insecurity.
Thank you. The one that is supposed to, the one that aspires to a relative absence of fear, right? And that's the police. And for me, there's a lot wrong there. I have issues with the police. Now, I think there are three presidential committee reports on the police.
We've just carried out a reform of the police.
No, you pass a law. No, but that's not a reform. That's an aspiration. That's a promise of reform. But the fundamental structure has not been reformed.
The security challenge is now very widespread.
Extremely.
And one of the key points that has since emerged is the need to fund it.
Yes.
More people,
yes.
More equipment,
yes.
More logistics,
everything.
And all of
training,
that.
Whatever.
So that brings up the issue of how you do that.
Yes.
In the case of Lagos State,
yes.
Lagos being the commercial center of the
yes.
country
yes.
and having the largest population, may have been ahead of others in setting up a state security trust fund, from which it aims to assist the security
yes.
forces. It gives up the question, though, he who pays the piper dictates the tune.
To a degree.
Your experience
yes.
as head of
yes.
that fund, do you see a situation where there is a clear demarcation between helping to fund and taking over control
yes. It? Okay. The way we looked at it, right, for us it was, there's a matter of urgency, first of all. But we looked at it in terms of the whole public, not any specific. Some donors thought that they could appropriate, for their own purposes, whatever, but we dispelled that very quickly. I think that the police are, from our experience, we knew that we could influence, if not control, some of the outcomes we wanted. Because, as I said, for us, the police approach was sometimes not in consonance with the challenge, if you like. I mean, so for instance, if you have traffic robbery, right, then do you identify particular parts that in the morning and evening are,
particularly prone to this?
Yeah, prone to, are vulnerable to this, and then say to the police, because you are the one giving them vehicles and so on. We say, look, you guys go to these particular places, and if you need vehicles, okay, we'll give you the vehicles. This is what we want you to do. Yes, to that extent, yeah, but it's not really as long as it's in the general interest, and not me as the MD saying to the police, I want 3 of the vehicles
in my estate.
So that's a question of. There must be a basic morality in when you are dealing with this. We must be able to see the larger interest.
Has the funding become more difficult, do you think, or efforts to enhance the funding become more difficult both by politicization?
Well, not in Lagos. We were
but
not
nationally.
No, but
because why I raise that question is that we all know you're quite familiar with the debate over whether or not there should be state police or community police. And then the question of how do we fund it also comes up. States that aren't able to pay salaries, how can we be talking about handing them people with weapons to pay and all of that? Has that complicated what could otherwise have been a fairly more simple argument?
No, not really, because the argument is not that the Constitution will say every state shall have state police. It will just say you are able to, if you want to, if you can manage the process. And then, of course, you'll have to set out the various areas. Which area will federal police take up and which will state? For instance, the police are not likely, for instance, to pay much attention to environmental infringements in a state. They'll say that's for, you know,
that the agency.
Their agency. So the state would need, you know, its own police to deal with such matters, to enforce court judgments, and so on and so forth. So it will be, there'll first of all be a determination of where the powers lie. And then the issue of funding and politicization is a matter for the democratic institutions. I think we have not, in my view, used our institutions like the House of Assembly and so on enough so that they would act as a check on the governor. And then at the end of the day, what the governor, whatever he does, he takes political responsibility for the failings of the police. And then he goes back to the electorate and they said, you didn't handle security well. So that is there. In the current case, federal police officers within a state are not accountable to the political order in that state. And that makes it more difficult to manage the space. With the police duties today, they are overextended. So if a state wants to deal with its traffic situation, there are not enough police officers and not enough commitment to make sure that the laws are obeyed there. So, but let me point out that there's now a police trust fund, a national trust fund, which was modeled after, you know, it was after us that NGOs and so on pushed for it. Remember, ours was just donations from the state government and private sector. This is by law attracting 0.5% of national revenue. This is billions. And 0.05% of the profits, gross profits of corporations. So for the police, if it's properly run and properly administered, their financial problem has been fine. Now the army wants their own trust fund.
Well, but do you think if there were, is that the way to go? Do you think it will be a viable option to set up that kind of structure for the security forces nationally?
Yes.
Precisely because one of the big problems that is currently happening is the issue of funding. We really cannot fund this.
I think there are two issues, as we heard from what happened to the $2 billion. See, no matter how much money you give, if there is corruption, it will undermine the whole system. So the key, I have my problem with the police trust fund, for instance, is that it's called a trust fund, but it's run by the police. A trust fund is managing money for other people, but they put the IG there. They put, you know, it's like a government board. So, so you have to, but we would expect that a responsible board, even if there are some legal issues with regard to who's a trustee, who's not, because you can't be a trustee and a beneficiary, which is what has happened. But if they can apply the money, number one, well, and two, restructure the police. So that otherwise, even if you give the police 1 million vehicles, right? If they are not, if it's the same method that they are using, almost expeditionary, right? Always responding to something rather than stopping things, then not much is going to change. But for fund, you know, the police are, in my view, all right. And they've already spent about 11 billion, you know, which is slow for me because it's 2 years old now and it's a 6-year-old thing. The law says they last for 6 years and then determine whether. So already 2 years have gone. But they've spent quite a bit on vehicles and so on. But I want them to be. We lost 27 police stations in Lagos, right?
Yes.
After the
NSAS. Yes.
I would want the PTF to move in now and it's over a year, 2019, am I right? Was it 2019?
No, 2020. It's going to be a year.
Okay, it's going to be a year. And those stations are still there, gutted by fire. That means your structure is weak because there's no station around which, you know, you can enforce some control. So I think it's not, they shouldn't just think of procurement. We didn't. I recall that in our early years, the policemen of Bode Thomas police station, were in a rented house. And they hadn't been paying rent, the police. So the man went to court. And they were going to evict them. You know, the police. You know, that's how we operate sometimes, very strange. We bought the house for 50 million, the trust fund, so that they could remain there. So it's not just about procuring, you know, vehicles, and they've got to be creative in their application of the funds.
Well, you talked about the legal framework.
Yes.
What people have found out is that when you mention legal framework, necessarily the lawmaking responsibility is the National Assembly and then the state houses of assembly. And at that point, it stops being a strictly legal matter and
becomes political.
And then becomes political. And usually when it becomes political, then you run into some stumbling blocks that may not have otherwise been thought of. Is that another part of what is our security challenge now? Because I asked you earlier in the interview when I said, the fact that the issue of security seems to have become politicized is also a problem, isn't it? Apart from the security itself.
Decision making, in even accepting that responsibility of a particular group or whatever, yes, it has become political. But that should not influence, right, the decision making of the institutions. It is when the institutions themselves become politicized that you're going to have problems in terms of determining which way do we go. Yes, the National Assembly, not only are they primary beneficiaries, for instance, of VIP protection, they come from different perspectives. Sometimes they divide along regional lines. Sometimes, you know, they don't, whoever is making a case there's no clarity. The police budget that they kept repeating, bringing before them 300 and something billion, 300 and so, was just ridiculous because 80% of it went for personnel costs. So the states became the burden carriers, expending on unfunded mandates. There is no mandate in the Constitution for states to spend money on the police. Police Trust Fund will free the states of the burden they've been carrying for the last 20 years. Like I said, the National Assembly has not been, you know, politics aside, they've not been realistic in the budget process, right? And that's why they had to create a PTF. My suggestion was that they should have just tripled the budget for the police. But then the budget is a different creature altogether. From the PTF. With the trust fund, you can act quickly and intervene and so on. We needed to act quickly. Yes, and we needed to act quickly. And if you triple the budget now, you're not likely to get the funds to support it. But this has come from a long number of years where we didn't really address the problem. What is the police problem? Because I am of the view that if the police had been more effective, better funded, etc., a lot of these outbursts of violence would have been tempered. And then if you free up the 100,000 armed policemen on VIP protection and send them to, it will be much more effective, you know, in terms of addressing the problem.
Let me bring you, now, apart from being a lawyer that I mentioned earlier,
Yes.
you also worked
Yes.
in the prosecutory arm of the judiciary as Solicitor General and Permanent Secretary. So again, you have an idea of
Yes.
that. The idea that sometimes the process and the speed
Yes.
with which justice
Yes.
is seen to be dispensed
Yeah.
or not
Yes.
is also fanning
Yes, of
insecurity.
course,
That is,
of course.
people who commit
And mob
crimes and
violence.
so on. Yes, that you have others saying,
Yes.
well, this other man
Yes.
did something wrong
Yes.
and he's still here.
Yes.
Nobody has held
Nobody
him
has
to
held him.
account.
Yes.
So why should I be bothered or
Yeah.
why should I be deterred
Yes.
from doing this?
committed,
Is
yes.
that a fair comment, do you think?
Yeah, I would say certainly, in spite of, you know, reforms and the passing of the Criminal Justice Administration Act,
Right.
institutions have been slow to, if you like, catch up with the requirements. Again, this is an element, and I wasn't part of the judiciary, I was part of the executive.
Indeed.
Again, under-resourcing, right?
So again, funding.
Again, funding. And when I say funding, it's not just that if you fund, you magically, there are, I mean, the courts, you know, the Federal High Court, for instance, you know, the process by which you file and is so laborious because, one, we need to improve our organizational skills and our respect for doing things within time frames. We need, and it won't matter if you appoint another 100 judges, you'll just be caught up in the same. We don't have a managerial approach to the process. We are not looking at outcomes. We're just looking at process. We need to change the philosophy by which we attend justice matters. It even affects investment. Once people hear that, they're like, what? How are my rights going to be protected? And how soon? So I think the country needs, like the wheel, that big wheel, it needs to be given a few more spins. Consequence management. It takes too long to, you know, deal with matters. A lot of things have contributed to the slowness, and you are right. For instance, so many arrests have been made in the last 2 years, and so many parades, you know, of the suspects have been made. The police will come and show us how a gun was hidden under a seat and so on and so forth, and all of so a lot of drama. How many of these cases have been prosecuted to conclusion? I can say of Lagos that they are moving very fast because they've applied many of the provisions of the criminal justice. Yeah, they have, and so they've done plea bargain. Now, with the number of cases we have from all those arrests, there's no way we're going to be able to prosecute them through the trial process. There's no way. And in any, go around the world that uses our adversarial system, 90% of cases are plea bargained. 90%. Then 10%, like R. Kelly, you know, those, you know, big cases are prosecuted. But most of them are. So we must, and since the law has provided for plea bargain, we must, you know, there must be closure.
That could also help with the decongestion of prisons,
you know,
and recidivism.
Exactly. Those are some of the things. But look, everywhere in the world, it takes a long time to reform justice and police systems. They are the most resistant to change. But once you have a strong executive that's ready to support them and strong judicial officers and strong members of the bar, then you can, begin to get. But we seem to be leaving it a bit late. I think we have we have so many cases now, the number of people arrested. So, where are they and when are they going to trial? These are, for me, very important things. Very important, because you see the tendency these days for mob violence.
Yes, that is, they're not prepared to wait.
They just set him alight, and you can't tell me that you can't. It's not established, this man's guilt, but
he's
the
dead.
crowd doesn't want to, so that's dangerous, in my view.
Now, the other part of this is that you have internal migration.
Yes.
Also fanning insecurity.
Yes.
And some states have gone the extra mile.
Yes.
Of course, people have raised questions about the constitutionality of all of that.
And all of that.
Deporting people from their state who don't have a fixed address, no fixed functions, and so on. Now, I want you to speak to two things fairly quickly. The first is the constitutionality of that, given the background of security.
Yes.
And then secondly, how is this supposed to work, since we're supposed to have freedom of movement?
The right to move contains within it the prescription that you do not become disruptive in your host community. So it's not absolute, but it's there. Fine. I mean, people come, they want to trade. If a man is a robber and let's not even say a robber. Let's say he harasses young ladies, right, in the neighborhood, and this gets to the authorities. Okay, first they'll charge him with assault and indecent and so on. But again, since we are now talking about alternative approaches to justice, right, rather than bear the cost of trying him, which we often don't know that there's a cost. We can ask him, right, where are you from? Where are your parents, etc. That's a social welfare element, right? It's not,
which is why you say it isn't deportation.
It's not deportation. It's return.
I must then take it, because the whole issue behind internal migration is the question of how it now affects security.
Yes.
It's the question of...
That's why I say it shouldn't be disruptive.
Which means that, in your view, already the law provides for that.
Provides for what?
Provides for state authorities.
Yes.
To say, no, you can't.
You can't come and, basically, for instance, if you come and you bring some new religion, right, and you begin screaming and the host community is upset, etc., then you have to manage the situation. It's almost like people say, I mean, that's Lagos challenge, isn't it? Migration. So, and then people say, oh, you can't stop Okada now. How will they eat? But they have disrupted, they have disrupted the peace on the streets. They don't obey the law. They don't care about, order, etc. So it's to find that balance. There's no problem with migration per se of how many people, because if you are a food seller, for instance, the more people that come, the more you're going to sell. So for some people, it's okay. But for those who were already residing, doing business within it can be disruptive. So it's not deportation. Perhaps, let me put it another way. For me, the only time, migration, internal migration is a problem is when it is disruptive, when it upsets the security structure, etc. Now, strictly speaking, you can't really do much. But a lot of the migration, how are you sure that they are citizens? So I'm entitled.
Which talks about borders.
I'm entitled
border control.
I'm entitled to say, where are you from exactly? Because we never had this kind of experience before. So, what do we do? And those are some of the
nationally,
the
that brings up, because why I've started with that is that nationally it brings up the conversation about border control.
Yes.
Because first you have the national borders,
Yes, right.
then you have the internal borders,
yes.
and people in charge of various
Yes.
jurisdictions. Now, obviously there's a link between the national borders
Yes.
and what can happen within the state borders.
No, no.
You don't think so?
The state borders are administrative. They are not designed to stop people from moving in and out. They're just designed to determine the area of authority that the executive of a particular state has. And of course, you can't stop. It's like you are driving to Ogun. Nobody's going to stop you on the way and say, where are you going? Except those tax people that sometimes, disturb
Yeah, get
people.
onto the road, yes.
But, your state borders, I mean, and national, there's no nexus between them.
the two.
Yes, between the two. And that's why in determining people being sent back, like I said, it's not deportation. There's a social welfare element to it. If you get, what do you call them now? What do you call people who just sit on the roadside?
Destitutes?
Destitutes or, others. If you have a social welfare policy dealing with destitutes, you look for the best way to deal with it. So you call them, you say, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Anambra. Do you have parents? Yes. But the problem is when I started taking drugs, they threw me out of the house. I think a state is entitled to say, okay, we're going to take you back to your... So it's take you back, not force you back, I think. And I don't think any state, Lagos, I remember, I don't think it said we are forcing them. We were saying we think it's in their interest that they be returned to their place of origin so that they can be rehabilitated and so on.
Now, let me bring you to related issues
Yes.
now, but which also have a bearing on security.
Yeah.
There's the issue of federal state powers. You alluded to when you said that there's no such creature as the chief security officer of any state.
Yes.
The battle is ongoing over federalism,
Yes.
true federalism.
Yes,
what
fiscal
we need to
federalism,
do and all of
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
So I want to quickly get your
Yes.
views on a number of those.
Yes.
First of all, the issue of electoral reforms,
Yes.
which produce the leaders,
The
which we
leaders.
talked
Yes,
about
yes.
earlier. We've just done an electoral amendment
Yes.
now. The big hullabaloo was about electronic
voting.
and possible transmission of results and so on. What did you make of that? Was it an improvement?
Look, electronic, we're in 2021, so I didn't understand the tension between those who were for it, including the agency itself and the politicians. But the politicians are always afraid. The tighter regulated the process, the more likely you might not win the election. The world uses electronic voting now, and the systems are all over the place. We moved a step forward with the voting card some years back and the card reader. The logical next step was electronic voting. A voting day should not disrupt business. The billions we've lost because you restrict people's movement, you move 7,000 policemen from here to there. Germany just held elections. On the same day that there was what do you call the race? Marathon. The Berlin Marathon. I mean, these things are supposed to go parallel. They're not supposed to be, don't move. It's so primitive to say you restricted movement, etc. I'm going to move 7,000 policemen there as if there's a war about to start. So I think that those against it are disingenuous. I think, they're not, it's not an honest argument. If we really want democracy, if we really want every vote to count, then we've got to have a system that enables that and prevents, people running all over the place and, disrupting the process. So I think that if we engage in that, things will just be more peaceful. People will be able to, go and vote in many electronic booths without any disruption or queues, etc.
In terms of harmonious relationship, it doesn't seem as if many people are working in that direction at the moment. I want to take the issue of VAT, the court, the judgment that we have is the one from the High Court in River State, which says that actually states are supposed to collect. But there are those who have argued that this is not a legal, this case is not going to be a legal case. At the end of the day, it has to be resolved politically. That because if you go strictly legally, there may be some unintended consequences that would then be brought to bear. Already, there appears to have been a split. The southern governor supporting the court, the northern governor saying
clear politicization.
Now, what do you make of it? Because you're a lawyer.
Look, the VAT decree was passed during military rule. My view is that the federal government does not have the power to pass a VAT law. Because, number one, it is states that have the power to tax three things: capital gains, income, and profit. There's no other reference to any other type of tax in the Constitution. No, it's not on the exclusive list, VAT, and it's not in the, what do you call it? Concurrent. Therefore, my view is that it's a residual matter, right? And it should be the states that collect it. Ideally, the states will collect sales tax, because there are different taxes. One is a tax on an item, and VAT is a tax on the increase in an item from production, distribution to point of sale. There's a percentage on each value added, as they say, although it's usually industrial nations who produce everything that, you know, that. So my view is that, but as you said, just like 57 local government case, that was as clear as day, but it's just the idea. No. Even some other southern states that were with us in the beginning, when they saw the implication of resource control, they said, we are no longer interested.
Right.
Unfortunately, states have for so long relied on the revenue allocation from the federation account that they haven't really made efforts to. People think, I mean, you could turn your state into a health facility. Baltimore is health.
That's right.
India is health. You just build quality stuff and bring in people and make it like. The question now is, people argue, but you know, Nigeria is about sharing. And then the same people will slam Lagos for its inability to build the kind of infrastructure that it wants. So if there should be a political solution, and let them review the amounts that a state that generates keeps. You understand? There's too much taken. Lagos 49 billion, and then gets 13. And then Kano generates 2.8 and keeps 2.8. So if it's going to be political, it shouldn't be a one-sided political outcome. I think sensibly they should find a way. And then we need to free up states' capacity. Nasarawa has 28 known commercial solid minerals, but is unable to engage in their exploitation because that's a federal thing. There's got to be fairness. There's got to be equity. Otherwise, the system will not work. We'll just be stumbling along.
That brings me then back to where we started, which is security.
Yes.
And when we talk about federalism,
yes,
it does appear as if some people have taken the bull by the horns.
Yes.
In the case of Southwest,
yes,
you have Amontech.
Yes. And you could see the battle that they had to fight.
In order to put it together.
Yep.
I wonder if, as some have said, are we actually addressing the problem? Are we complicating it?
In terms of doing?
The security. I mean,
are we complicating it by creating these...
yes, this you know.
You said it before. It's expedient to do so because your people will hold you accountable. People are not interested in all those details about chief security officer not exist. To him, that's the man that we elected. He's the chief executive of the state. He should sort things out. So the question, let's look at it. Has the coming of Amotekun reduced criminality in the Southwest? There are no figures, but the perception is at least there's somebody responding to our concerns. Whereas the attitude of people, I have people in the Southwest all over, is that the police will be like, go and sort it out, or it's not really something we can do much about. So, yeah, let's get complicated. That's, you know, we should stop pretending that everything, let it get complicated. Stresses and strains might sort out our heads. The same, I mean, some people who a year ago said there shouldn't be independent, what do you call them now, security agencies, are now thinking of setting up their own. So, because Nigeria is very, very multifaceted. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. The types of the types of insecurity are not all the same. Zamfara has virtually been taken over. There's an admission, once you have to switch off communications, then it's a different solution than, say, Oyo. You know, the East has two facets. One is the ESN within, IPOB, etc. I mean, some of the murders, they're just terrible. But then they're also facing problems from another quarter. So they have their own, they have to have their own solution. Some other parts might have local, I would assume that in the South, for instance, there are some of the ex-militants who are probably, you know, battle-hardened enough, if you like, to create local. So you see that the South has been relatively, you know, relatively peaceful. So let it get complicated, in my view, so that at the end of the day, people are forced to make decisions. Amotekun, they force them. They battled with them in terms of, you know, everybody was involved, the Attorney General, the Vice President. At the end of the day, they got what they wanted. Not fully. They are not able to equip them fully and so on. But the mere fact that they're there and they're made up of local people and can intervene here and there is something, it's not my ideal. I don't like all these, what do you call them, vigilante sort of, I think they don't, that will complicate things. And that's a major issue with Nigeria today. The growth of vigilante third force. Right. And then the creation of strange civil defense. I don't know what their function is really, you know, they are not clear on the mandate. And they also are taken out of the, you know, the budget that's already, you know, then you've
quite constricted.
Yes, you know, we need to be focused. Normal countries, they have three elements of security: intelligence, police, and the armed forces. But we've created Federal Road Safety Corps, you know, this one. For me, it distracts from accountability. Who is responsible for internal security? The police. Who is responsible when the police don't have the capacity? Then the army comes in. But now it's almost, you know, I hope, because this thing is not, they're not going to just get up one day, all the bandits, and have an epiphany and say, oh, we're not doing again. It's because, look, Lagos, AVM, you know, and so on. So we need clarity. What's the doctrine? What is our doctrine in terms of dealing with various levels of, and how do we fund, and how do we manage? Because like I said, it's beyond funding.
That brings me then to my final question,
okay,
which has to do with, from everything we've said here,
yes,
it looks pretty complicated.
Daunting.
It looks pretty daunting.
Yes.
It looks,
yes,
you know, difficult.
Yes.
Do you still believe it can be done? Do you have
what can be done?
That is that we can overcome, yeah, these various challenges, or do you then say, or do you say you don't blame those who are headed for the exits? and say,
oh, okay. Well, that's the state of the world now. Movement. That's just this is another age of migration. Just as it happened, there's no country in the world that's not a product of, to some degree, migration. So people will move. That doesn't really bother me enough. There are 200 million, so that we are told, people. So.
That in itself is said to be a problem.
Yeah, well, but you can't take them to the river and drown them. They are with you. So, you just have to, my view is that we need more governance, properly day to day. We're a bit casual. Who is oversighting the IG? Because he should be answerable to his political leaders, but I don't see that kind of, it's almost as if we think we can wish away the problems. And once I'm okay, once I have my VIP protection, it's not really my problem. But it is. It's constricting the country. It's constricting its productive capacity. It's constricting its ability to be a tourist destination. You can't. You want to take somebody to Oshogbo, for their ceremony.
Yeah,
but throughout the trip, you are tense because you don't know what's going to happen. I think sometimes we're a bit. I keep saying it. We're distracted. We're facing a major, a security challenge. The fact that a state would have to cut off communities is a serious matter. It's serious. That means those guys are embedded, So I think beyond funding and all of that, we need clear policy. We need to make quick decisions. 100,000 policemen on VIP, you are going to Zamfara. That's it. It's not, I don't get how we just make... Now the policeman is no longer a police officer, the man on VIP. He's not a police officer, a servant. He's not. He is not accountable to you and me. If he is escorting somebody and he sees a crime taking place, he won't, address the crime, which is what his primary job is. So I think that we need to be more serious in terms of how we deploy resources and think of the big picture rather than the political and business VIP production. And then, again, some of the things that the police themselves will say. They say, no more black windows. Everybody ignores them. No more police spy number. Because all those they confuse the police. You see, but the same police that mention them don't seem to have the will to be able to, because you must have your basic level of order. That's why the Europeans, the Americans, is traffic. Look at the way they manage traffic. You can't go around with broken lights and no lights in the night. You are going to be, indicted. We seem to have abandoned, So for me, there are levels. There are levels. If we are going to tackle that banditry and so on, let's get, the average citizen to understand the importance of law and order. And then we can...
Thank you very, very much,
Mr.
Arthur-Worrey. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, too. It's always an honor, as I said.
That's NewsNight. Thanks for watching. Would love to hear from you on this conversation. Our social media handles are on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program by visiting our website, channelstv.com/podcast. I'm Ladi Akeredoluale. Goodbye.